Good morning all. Welcome back to our course on the C programming language. In this session we are going to discuss the part 3 of structures in C, and in detail we'll be discussing about only one concept, that is nested structures. We know what nesting is in the C programming language. Nesting is something we'll put one construct inside the same construct. For example, we have nested for loops where we'll put one for loop inside another for loop. This is the construct that we use for the nested for loops. In the similar fashion, we can also nest the structures. That means we can put one structure within another structure. So nested structure is a concept which allows to put one structure within another structure. So there are two different ways in which we can implement this nested structure. That is, two ways in which we can implement the nested structure. The first one is by using a separate structure, outside of the structure, and we will declare the variable within another structure. So that is also considered to be a nested structure. And the second method is by embedding the structure within another structure. We'll look at these two different ways of nesting the structures with one proper example each, and we'll also see how we can access the members of the nested structures, with what operator we are going to use. All these things we'll discuss. Right. So coming to the first method of defining the nested structure is by using a separate structure. Let us take a structure called person, struct person, which consists of members as the name, and let me take another member as gender, and this time I would like to take the date of birth, where date of birth will consist of three different members. One is the day, the second one is the month, and the third one is the year. So this DOB, date of birth, is a variable that consists of three different members. So this can be declared as a structure. Let us see what data type it should have. That is a different case, but remember that DOB is a structure. And let us end this person. This is how I have defined one particular structure. Now I have used a DOB and I am saying that it is a variable of type structure. So before making use of this structure variable, the first step is to define the structure. So I would like to define the structure DOB, struct date of birth. Date of birth is the name of my structure, and in that I am taking three different values like this: day, int, month, and int year. So these are the three different members of the structure date of birth. So here at this particular point, from here to here, we have created or we have defined a new data type, and we know that memory will not be allocated for these type of definitions. Memory will be allocated only at the time of declaration, right? So we need to declare, or we can make use of this structure within another structure by declaring its variable. And coming back to this struct person data type, this is also another data type that I have defined here, that is struct person, and within this struct person I have name as my data member, and second data member is gender, and third data member is DOB, and this DOB is of type the new data type. So I should declare this variable as struct date of birth and DOB. So this DOB is a variable of type struct date of birth. So we are defining a structure variable inside another structure variable. So date of birth variable has been defined inside this person. Therefore this is an example of how we are going to embed, or how we are going to create a structure within another structure. This is method 1. Let us go with the method 2, where, let me write it here. The second method is we just embed the structure definition within another structure definition. For example, I want to declare a struct person like this. Struct person, this is my new data type, and here I am making use of the variable char name of 50, and this is char gender, and after this I need to declare a structure here. Here I am not going to declare a structure variable, I am going to define the structure within the structure itself. That's the reason why we call this method as embedding nested structure. So I want to create a structure struct date of birth and date of birth, and I define the structure like this: int day, int month, int year, and after this I specify the variable as DOB, and here I end this structure person. So at this point you can observe here that we have embedded a structure date of birth within another structure person. So this is the second method of embedding the structure within another structure. But you have to observe the differences between these two methods. Here in the first method, where we have separated the structure definition with the structure definition of another structure, the advantage what we have with this first method is this date of birth structure can be utilized in any other structure by just defining the variable. But when you consider this DOB, this second method, where we are embedding the date of birth within another definition of the structure, this will not allow you to make use of this date of birth structure outside of this structure person. But here this date of birth can be utilized by any other structure just by simply declaring the variable of this type. But here it will not allow us to make use of this date of birth outside of this struct person. This is the important point you should observe while using these nested structures. And the second important point what you can observe here is in the first method we are just defining the structure as step 1, and we are declaring the structure variables as step 2. But here in this second method, where we are embedding one structure within another structure, you can see that after defining the structure within another structure, you should enclose or you should create a variable of that type. It is mandatory that you always declare the structure variable at the time of defining the inner structure. So the struct person is called as the outer structure, and this is called as inner structure. So in the case of embedding one structure within another structure, it is mandatory that you always put this inner structure, or you always declare the variable of the inner structure at the time of definition itself. And what happens if you don't give this structure variable means an error will occur if the structure is present but the structure variable is missing. So be careful that the structure variable is always defined or always declared once you use this embedding method. So the important point is, whenever the embedded nested structure is created, the variable declaration is compulsory at the end of the inner structure, and that is the most important point you should observe here. And when the structure variable of the inner structure is declared at the end of inner structure, please make sure that you always declare the structure. So these are the two methods how we can create a nested structure. There may be some situations or some applications require the structures within structures. And remember that the structure members can be from the fundamental data types like int, char, float and double. And it can make use of the derived data types such as arrays, pointers, etc. And it can be a user defined data types such as structures and unions. So the members of structure can be from any of the data type. Members of structure are from, they can be fundamental data types, they can be derived data types, they can be user defined data types also. So these important points you should keep it in mind, and these are the nested structures concept that we have discussed. So before quitting this session, let us have a quick recap of what we have discussed. We started our discussion of structures, and that too the nested structures. We have seen an example of what nesting is in the C programming language. We have seen an example of nested for loop. Nesting in C programming language is nothing but putting one construct within the same construct. For example, nested for loop, one for loop within another for loop. This outer for loop, this is called as inner for loop. And here also the same concept, nested structures means C programming allows us to put one structure within another structure. That can be done in two ways, that is by using a separate structure or by embedding. The first method is by using a separate structure. You will define the structure outside of another structure, and you will be using the structure by declaring the variables within another structure. So we have given an example of date of birth structure, and similarly person structure. The person is going to make use of the variable of date of birth structure. And the second method is by embedding. That means you are going to embed the definition of the structure within another structure definition. Here you can see that the date of birth structure has been defined inside the person structure. So that's all for today's session. Thank you one and all for joining the session.